The door banged really slowly, but hard, like someone was hitting it with their fist instead of knocking. When I opened it, there was this horrible little man about 5 feet tall. He was dressed in a black suit and tie and had a funny little black hat on. His face was really strange. He looked like someone with anorexia, you know? His cheeks were all gaunt, his eyes were all dark, and his skin was almost white. I didn't know what to do and just stared. It was really frightening. Then he just suddenly gave me this horrible grin, and I could tell his lips had been colored, like lipstick or something. He took off his hat and had this really bad black wig on. He looked about 60, but the wig was jet black. All he said was, "We would ask you cease your studies." I said, "What?" Then he repeated it exactly the same, and I had to ask what he meant. "The skylights, always the skylights," he said. Then it dawned on me. I'd seen a UFO, a flying saucer thing, late at night about a week before, when me and my husband had been driving home, and we both had a really weird dream after about some little men standing around the car on the edge of the trees. Then he said something like, "Cease and dream easy," and he gave me a really long stare like he was going to attack me or something. But he didn't. He just walked away, down the drive. I started to feel dizzy and slammed the door. I just crawled into bed and fell asleep for about 3 hours. But when I woke up, there was this horrible smell like burning rubber all through the house. We had to have the windows open for days and get the carpets cleaned to get rid of the smell. It really shook me up. Statements made by Helen, a mother and housewife in 1994.
I fear not the dark itself, but what may lurk within it. Welcome to Lurk, bringing you creepy, strange, and bone-chilling stories, with your host, Jamie Jackson.
Hey Lurkers, it's Jamie.
And Angelina.
And today we're going to be discussing the elusive Men in Black.
Woohoo.
So we are discussing the Men in Black, as I said, and apologies now. We are recording in my dining room. And we
live from Studio 6.
Live from Studio 6. The dog is here. The cat is here.
And we are here.
And we're here. So chances are there's going to be dog or cat noise because they think that we're here for them.
Yes. And maybe ghost noise. You never know.
Not in the dining room, probably. I've never had anything happen in the dining room. Most people think about the blockbuster movie Men in Black when they hear the name Men in Black. But we're not talking about Will Smith or Tommy Lee Jones.
Sadly, because that would be a lot of fun.
It would be fun. They're attractive. I really like Tommy Lee Jones. I have a thing for older men.
I really like Will Smith. I saw him in Savannah when he was doing Gemini Man. It's pretty cool.
I love Savannah, too.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
We digress.
Awesome city.
But we're not talking about Will Smith or Tommy Lee Jones. In the last 7 decades, there have probably been thousands of reports of encounters with Men in Black, not only in the U.S., but around the globe.
All over the place.
All over the place. And they all have a similar appearance. Most of them are tall. No,
not dark and handsome, though.
No, not tall. No, not dark and handsome. Far from handsome. Not dark.
Not dark.
But there is one account that I'll be talking about where they are short.
Yes.
They're actually short.
And actually, there are reports of dark-complected Men in Black that have almost a bronze quality to their skin. And I don't have any in the notes right here. If I can find that, I'll give that link to you to post.
Yeah, I can put that in the show notes.
Yeah.
They're tall. Most of them are tall. Thin, almost emaciated in some accounts. They're pale-skinned, dressed in black suits and hats. Some have no facial hair, and by no facial hair, I mean no eyebrows or eyelashes. No hair at all. And ruby red lips, almost like they're wearing lipstick, which in some instances, I think...
They seem to be.
It came off.
Yeah.
And it actually did appear to be lipstick.
Yeah.
Some of them have kind of large eyes, and eyes are also typically described as having a hypnotic effect.
Mm-hmm.
Thick-soled shoes is another descriptive that is in a couple of accounts.
Yep. And a lot of times their clothing is ill-fitting, almost like it's kind of hanging off of them. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't fit properly. In one case, the pants were too short,
Yes.
way too short.
They have alien or mechanical movements. They seem to have the ability to read your mind or have telepathic type abilities.
And some people have even reported telepathic
Yes.
communication with them.
They usually drive older model black vehicles, but they're pristine.
Right.
They're
As
not
if
like
they
beaters.
were new. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, one account describes the vehicle as better than new.
Mm-hmm. They show up unannounced, and they appear to people who have had UFO or alien encounters, or people who research UFO or alien encounters. Typically, they tell them to stop researching, destroy evidence, stop talking about it, and they usually threaten the person and or their family.
Right.
A lot of times they represent themselves as a member of an organization, sometimes presenting an ID card that is white with a crest and the word security on it. So it's just a generic card.
They often give the impression of being government agents, even though, and we'll get into this, even though some people report normal-looking government agent type men in black, these others that are hairless, that are pale and all of that, they do seem to present themselves as if they were FBI or CIA or some covert operation.
Mm-hmm. They sometimes refer to each other as numbers, like, I'm agent number 2. You know why I picked number 2.
I know. I don't want to be agent number 2.
Okay, you don't have to be.
I'll be agent number 1.
That's fine. I'll be number 3. I didn't want to be number 2 either. That just brings to mind the Austin Powers movie where he's like doing the swirly and he's like, who does number 2 work for? And then Tom Arnold's characters go, you tell him, buddy. You tell that turd who's boss. I'm sorry. They refer to each other's numbers sometimes. We'll go back to, we'll regroup there. And then they're able to know about the encounter that the person has had, even if the person has never even talked about it before.
Right.
So they already have all the information, even if the information has never even been put out there in any way for them to be able to know it.
Yes. And they do have, seems to have sort of psychic abilities beyond that to be able to even kind of see what people have on their persons and things like that, objects and such.
So that brings us to, that's pretty much it for description for the most part.
Yes.
The basic generic. In discussing some of the encounters, we may throw in something else.
Yeah, I mean, thick-soled shoes and thick-framed glasses.
Yes, like Coke bottle lens glasses is another descriptive that sometimes is associated with them.
Yeah, and if you ever, research these cases on your own, you're definitely going to come across some that are outliers that don't follow this prescription, because none of them, there are just so many. So we're kind of giving you an overview of most sightings.
Yeah, I mean, some don't fit this. Some don't have all of them. Some may have one thing that we've discussed about. It's just trying to give you an overview of what the...
Intimidating men wearing black. Yeah. I mean, that's really the...
Yeah, they wear black. They drive older model black cars.
Yeah.
That is very basic. They all do that.
Yes.
Then again, actually, Mary Hyer's description in the first one she had, he was wearing a blue uniform, short sleeve uniform, and pants.
So scratch that.
So scratch that. They can show up in whatever the heck they want and drive whatever, but they're creepy. That pretty much is the basis.
Pretty much the basis.
They're creepy as you know what. So that brings us to the incident that kind of got all these started, referred to as the Maury Island incident, and it happened in 1947.
Yeah, and to set the tone, just to kind of give you just a very brief background, in June of 1947, we have the Kenneth Arnold sighting over Mount Rainier, Washington. It was 9 silver aircraft skipping along the sky like saucers. So the Maury Island incident is going to be following this.
Yes,
and just to give you context.
You'll remember Kenneth Arnold's account because it was in episode 3 of the UFO Ranch.
Right.
So we did discuss that a little bit more in depth. Not super in depth, but just setting the tone for the history in the area for the UFO Ranch episode. Episode 3, if you haven't listened to it, you can go check that out.
Yep.
So the Maury Island incident, basically, it surrounded Fred Chrisman and Harold Dahl. Kenneth Arnold's account actually happened a couple days later, but his was more, his was nationwide news. It was all over the news. And he started interviewing people and talking to people about their accounts.
Right.
So that's how he's tying in with the two people, Fred Chrisman and Harold Dahl, who were involved in this particular incident. Kenneth Arnold, I don't think, ever had any Men in Black show up.
Not that I know of.
He actually interviewed Harold Dahl. Dahl actually said to Ken, he was describing the incident. On June 21st, 1947, in the afternoon, about 2 o'clock, I was patrolling the east bay of Maury Island. I, as captain, was steering my patrol boat close to the shore of a bay on Maury Island. On board were 2 crewmen, my 15-year-old son and his dog. As I looked up, and that's to mean the crewmen were not the 15-year-old son and the dog, the way that I read that. There were 2 crewmen and his 15-year-old son and the dog. As I looked up from the wheel on my boat, I noticed 6 very large donut-shaped aircraft. Before long, one of them fell nearly 1,500 feet, followed by raining metallic debris, some of which hit Dahl's son, Charles, on his arm, as well as the family dog, who did not survive the ordeal. Dahl was able to take some pictures of the aircraft with his camera, which he later showed to his supervisor, Fred Chrisman. A skeptic, Chrisman, decides that he's going to go back to the scene himself because he's not taking it at face value. So he goes back to the same area and he too sees a strange aircraft with his own eyes. So the following morning, Dahl was visited by a man in a black suit.
Man in Black.
Yes. They end up at a local diner where the man was able to recount in extraordinary detail what Dahl had just experienced. What I have said is proof to you that I know a great deal more about this experience of yours than you will want to believe. The man was quoted as saying, according to author Gray Barker's book, they knew too much about flying saucers. So Dahl was warned not to talk about the incident or bad things would happen. He eventually came out and said it was all a hoax.
Mm-hmm.
But then many years later, he recanted saying that it was a hoax and said he said that because there was so much pressure for him to not talk about it and not do anything. The threats that he received from this person scared him into saying, oh, it was totally fake. I totally made it up.
Yeah.
But he said he didn't, and he actually did witness it. The debris, he actually, I think, had a piece of debris plus the photos.
Right.
And the debris killed the dog. It hit the dog and killed it, and it broke his son's arm. So we're not talking about a scratch or something. Mm-hmm. It actually, his son had a broken arm, and the dog is dead.
Yeah, something happened.
Something happened. So that was the very first Men in Black incident.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
As far as
modern times.
Yeah.
In conjunction with UFOs.
Right. So next we're going to go to an individual by the name of Albert Bender, who is, I'd say he's pretty eccentric.
Mm-hmm. Very.
And I don't mean anything negative by that because I consider myself eccentric as well.
Mm-hmm.
Or weird.
Aren't we all?
Yes. Well, the two of us are.
We are. Albert K. Bender. Of Bridgeport, Connecticut.
According to the book, The Real Men in Black, which was written by Nick Redfern, Albert Bender, quote, almost single-handedly ushered in the plague of the Men in Black.
Mm-hmm.
It's a plague.
It is a plague.
It's a plague of them, the cat's back.
Yes.
Bender lived in the attic room of his stepfather's home in Connecticut, and he had a fascination with paranormal phenomena. Growing up, he enjoyed horror movies, was always interested in the paranormal, and ended up becoming interested in UFOs and aliens. He actually painted kind of, I think some of the descriptions are grotesque faces and things on the walls of his room in the attic.
Yeah. Bender dubbed this attic room his chamber of horrors.
Yes. And he had plans to turn it into like a Halloween themed like haunted house.
Right.
That never happened.
Like not a creepy, horrible chamber of horrors where bad things happen. It was a paranormal kind of fun.
Yeah, it was supposed to be like a fun
creepy
thing.
Fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he ended up not doing any kind of haunted house with it. He just slept in it. So
yeah, which is
you know, I'm all about the paranormal. I don't really know that I could sleep in a room with like creepy things painted on the walls.
Right.
But to each his own.
Yes.
Nothing wrong with the fascination in the paranormal or horror movies or anything like that because I'm not big on the horror movie thing. I don't like gore. I don't like like the newer horror movies where it's like, let's cut off everybody's appendages.
And back then, horror movies weren't
bloody.
What they are today.
The psychological horror movies are far better than the gory horror movies. So the other thing about Albert Bender, besides the paranormal interest, is that he was said to suffer from OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder, and was a little bit of a hypochondriac. Neither one of these are like mind-altering issues.
There are issues many people struggle with on a daily basis. It doesn't make you...
I have a touch OCD.
Me too.
I'm not, like, if you watch TV, the Monk television show, he had OCD, but he was, like, over the top. Most people have it. It's not a crazy
more like,
thing.
Don't move my stuff. Don't move my stuff. Don't touch my stuff. I know where my stuff is.
Or, like, I always, when I leave someplace and I lock the door, I have to make sure the door is locked. And I, do it a certain number of times.
Right.
And when I go to bed and I set my alarm, I then have to check to make sure that I have to turn the alarm on and off 3 times and check the time to make sure it's right 3 times.
Okay.
So it really depends on the person and the level. So there's nothing wrong. Speaking of somebody who has OCD, there's nothing wrong. It doesn't make you crazy. You're not crazy.
No.
It's totally fine. And hypochondriac, that's basically... you think you have ailments that you don't.
Right. Which still isn't necessarily... I mean, that does play into this a little bit, perhaps, but not to the extent that it changes kind of what his experience was. So, Albert.
Hypochondriac.
OCD.
Not crazy.
No. Passion for the paranormal.
Basically, he's us.
He's kind of, he's a little bit of all of us.
He might be a little bit odder than...
Maybe. Oh, he was also, interestingly enough, he was a former Air Force airman as well, just to put it into context. And he was also fascinated by the disappearance of Flight 19, the squadron of 5 Avenger torpedo bombers that took off from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, flying a routine training mission, and they disappeared over the Atlantic Ocean. And so he...
in the Bermuda Triangle.
And the PBM Mariner flying boats that were sent out to look for them, one of them mysteriously disappeared with its 13-man crew, and neither has been found. There's been some speculation, but there's been no confirmation. So that was also a big influence, on his interest in UFOs in particular.
Yeah, I think that kind of started his whole UFO and really ramped up his paranormal interests.
Yeah, and then sort of took it down that UFO path from kind of your generic paranormal things to specifically to UFOs, and that was the 5th of December, 1945. So it even predates Kenneth Arnold's sighting and Roswell. So it's pretty fascinating.
Yes. Bermuda Triangle, one of the 2 things I thought I needed to be careful of as an adult. The other one being quicksand.
Exactly. Those were my 2.
It's very disappointing that neither one has been such a problem.
I was terrified of quicksand.
I was terrified. I know how to get out of quicksand.
Yeah.
I know how to do that because I was terrified. You don't struggle and you lay flat. You float on your back and you don't struggle until somebody comes to help you. In case any of you get into quicksand.
Yes, we have life skills.
Seriously thought that was going to be a problem. Bermuda Triangle, you're just screwed.
There's nothing you're doing.
I was very excited when I found out my cruise ship was going to go through the triangle. I might have taken some equipment with me. We'll talk about that on another episode. The Bermuda Triangle is going to be an episode.
Yeah.
But. So, December 1915, not 1915, I don't think he was alive then. December 1950, Bender begins to collect and cross-reference reports and stories about UFOs.
Yeah.
He then begins taking steps to establish a worldwide network of UFO investigators that he called the International Flying Saucer Bureau, or the IFSB. And the IFSB came to be in April of 1952. So Bender published a magazine called Space Review. And then the IFSB caught the attention of UFO enthusiasts across the world, and UFO reports started flooding in. They had representatives of the IFSB appointed in several countries, and it became a force in the UFO research, but it didn't last very long.
No. But at its height, they had about, I think, over 600 members. He was pretty successful very quickly.
Yes. July 30th, 1952, there's an anonymous telephone call made to the Bender residence. Albert answers the phone, but no one spoke. And he was certain that someone was on the other end. And then suddenly his head began to throb and he became dizzy and had to go to bed. A few days later, he's fully recovered. He decides to go to the movies to see the latest sci-fi flick. And on the walk home, he has the sense of being followed by someone hostile. He never sees anybody. There's never any mention that anybody was seen, but he felt like he was being followed and it was a hostile feeling. He makes it home. He's fine. But as he goes to the door of his attic room, he notices there's a glow coming from the gap under the door. And so he throws the door open and he's hit with the strong smell of burning sulfur and a bright shimmering object hovering in the room. His eyes feel irritated and he turns the room's light on and the object disappears. He could tell at that point that his IFSB files were out of place. And he put the incident kind of out of his mind. So a couple things. First of all, if you have OCD, you know when somebody's messed with your stuff.
Absolutely.
You know, even if your room is a mess. Like I have OCD in some, like my workspace, right? That's why we're in the dining room, because my workspace is a mess. But I know where every single thing is on my desk, even though it's not cleaned up right now. Yeah. So if somebody moves something, I know it. Mm-hmm. And then why do you put this incident out of your mind so quickly? Like it said he just kind of put it out of his mind.
Which makes no sense.
You have a glowing object in your room. You're smelling sulfur.
Right.
And your files have been messed up, but you're like, no big. Like, how do you even sleep in that room anymore?
I wouldn't.
And
I don't know. That's a very good question. I wonder if that was from his original account or from his book, because there are variances in his accounts over the years.
Right. Yes.
So, yeah, there's that.
November 1952. He's again at the movies watching a sci-fi flick. And I'm saying flick so I don't say movie twice in a row. He's at the movies watching a movie. Yeah, watching a movie. He's at the movie theater and he became overwhelmed by a strange and unsettling feeling of dread and trepidation and a sense of being stared at from the darkness of the theater. Out of the corner of his eye, he sees a human form materialize in a nearby seat. It's a well-dressed man in dark clothes and his eyes glowed like flashlight bulbs, which is a direct quote. Bender becomes dizzy and he's forced to close his eyes to lessen the nausea. When he opens his eyes, the figure has gone, but a moment later, he has the feeling of being watched and he turns and there behind him was the glowing-eyed, well-dressed figure staring at him.
Creepy.
And I do want to point out the corner of the eye thing, that's very Shadow People.
Yeah, it is.
Which was an episode, and I don't remember which number. 18. I think it was episode 18. And if I'm right, I deserve like a piece of candy because I pulled that off. Like Ange can say, I sat here and thought for a second. Pretty sure it's episode 18, so go back and listen to that if you haven't. So he sees this guy from the corner of his eye. He closes his eye because he gets dizzy and sick to his stomach. When he opens them again, he doesn't see the person, but then all of a sudden is feeling like somebody's watching him and the guy's behind him now. So Bender leaves and heads home. And his dizzy spells continue after that. He's also having brief sightings of mysterious figures, and they continue over the next few months. Also, he's having poltergeist-like activity in his room, and the brimstone and sulfur smell lingers off and on for days.
Right, and he's also getting strange phone calls. He says he receives telepathic messages, and that there are UFO sightings over southern Connecticut where he lives. So he correlates all of this to his experiences.
He also develops migraines.
Yes,
too.
He does.
I also want to point out, while we're referring to the activity like poltergeist activity, I don't mean it's not ghost.
Right.
We discussed similar things in the Skinwalker Ranch. I don't remember the episode that was. It's a 2-parter.
Yeah.
Check it out if you didn't, because Skinwalker is awesome. So the Sherman family had an issue with things disappearing and reappearing or appearing in places they weren't supposed to be. The salt and pepper being switched in the shakers and all kinds of stuff. So poltergeist-like activity, but not that it's an actual
entity,
ghost.
Like a
it's
ghost.
It's not a ghost.
Yeah.
Just to clarify.
So from his home in Bridgeport on Broad Street, Albert began kind of blending his physical UFO research with mental telepathy. He actually asks his readers of Space Review to memorize and silently recite a letter that he wrote. So his goal was to connect with alien life through thought projections of IFSB members. So he creates this World Contact Day at 6:00 in the evening, Eastern Standard Time, 15th of March, 1953. The telepathic message opened, calling occupants of interplanetary craft that have been observing our planet Earth. We of IFSB wish to make contact with you. We are your friends. So he is telling his readers in Space Review to all together on this day at this time, call out to your space brothers and try to contact them. The interesting thing when I read this article was it made me actually think of Dr. Stephen Greer, who is basically doing the exact same thing with SETI. And I'm sure you will hear more about, a little bit more about him in this podcast here, and maybe also in some future podcasts. This is the first time you really hear about anybody trying to telepathically communicate with alien life. So it's different.
So the next, after his World Contact Day, July 1953, Albert is visited in his home by 3 men. Bender stated, all of them were dressed in black clothes. They looked like clergymen, but wore hats similar to Hamburg style. The notorious men in black, always in 3s, which that was another descriptor that we messed up. Usually they're in 2s or 3s.
Right.
They don't usually show up as singles, but they do. But mostly it's 2s or 3s.
Yeah.
Now, they made it clear to Bender that he was to cease all UFO work, and before departing, they confiscated copies of the Space Review. When they left, there was a yellow mist that appeared, and once again, the odor of sulfur.
Which we never really know what that is even supposed to correlate to, honestly. I don't think I've read anywhere what that was speculated to be about. Now, I have not read his book. Maybe he talks about it in there.
Yeah, I haven't read his book either.
Yeah.
Might have to see if I can find it. It might be hard to find. Probably out of print, though. So.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Maybe for $850,000 you can buy it on Amazon.
Yeah. So that happens, and then he's also told, they basically told him that there would be swift and deadly punishment if he didn't stop. He was so terrified, he actually shut down the IFSB October 1953.
With no explanation.
No
at
explanation,
that time.
yeah.
He just shut it down.
It's only there for a year and a half. It started in April of 52. October of 53 is not 16 months. It's 18 months.
Yeah.
It's a year and 6 months.
And think about that. I mean, we don't have the internet. There's nothing like that going on back then. So to have 600 members internationally and to be this well known so quickly, and then just to shut down with no explanation, people were kind of flabbergasted. They didn't know what was going on.
For me, thinking about it, you start a podcast and you become like the super massive hit of a podcast. And then all of a sudden you're like, crap, 3 creepy men showed up in my house and said, you either stop this podcast, or something bad's going to happen. I'd be like, tough dookie, because I'm not stopping, like that.
I like this podcast. No, thank you.
If you're being that successful in something you're so passionate about,
right,
and something that you've worked really hard. I mean, he had a magazine.
Mm-hmm.
He had it was a global organization. It was worldwide.
Yeah.
And then he has representatives in other countries. I mean, this was huge. In the 50s, that's huge. Mm-hmm. And to have that and just end it.
Right. And it was at the height of the interest, the height of the whole UFO craze. So I think, didn't the Washington, D.C. sighting occur in 1952, 53, somewhere around there?
I don't remember.
If I'm not mistaken. I
You're
could be
more
wrong.
well-versed in the sightings and things than I am.
But it was a big time in ufology.
Yeah. So I know people kind of discount him because he was eccentric. He was odd.
Right.
He had quirks. But I don't care how many quirks you have or how eccentric you are. If you are passionate about something like that and you're hugely successful, you don't stop doing that for no reason. No,
and that also actually brings another point about that. After this happened, he doesn't speak about it. He writes a book about it in 1962. In 1965, after this book, he never speaks of UFOs ever again. He moves to California, but he starts the Max Steiner Music Society in 1965. It was joined by actors such as John Wayne, Fred Astaire, and Vincent Price. This was a big organization. He published a journal and a newsletter, and it operated officially until 1981. And so he had no problem running an organization. So that it's not like he flaked out for no reason. Right. I mean, he went and created another society right after that was incredibly successful. It had, successful actors that belonged to it. And if you look him up, those are some of the first things that popped up when I looked him up. And I thought I had the wrong person. He was very well known and well respected. I think that it's a mistake to just completely blow him off and discount him.
I agree. This is going to bring us to a quick mention of Gray Barker, who I did mention as far as the book, They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers. I mentioned that with Harold Dahl from that incident, the Maury Island incident. Gray Barker was a resident of Clarksburg, West Virginia, and he wrote regular articles for Albert Bender's Space Review magazine. So he knew Albert Bender.
Some sort of an operating member of a board or some sort of a higher up member in the IFSB.
Yeah, I have that he was a member of IFSB, but he was pretty involved.
He was pretty involved.
As I said, he wrote a book called They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers, and in that book he included a very large section about Albert Bender's experience with the Men in Black. Barker avoided saying that the Men in Black were U.S. government agents like the FBI, but he implied it heavily. So he didn't come out and say it was the FBI, but... Right. By reading, apparently you knew that that's what he was trying to say.
Yeah, and I think John Keel, I had read, it wasn't in the Mothman Prophecies. This was actually in a subsequent book by John Keel. I can't remember the title right now. He mentions that Albert Bender's original account is different from the account that's in the 1962 account or book, which is also kind of interesting. So he implies that Albert Bender initially thinks it's government men, but that changes. Right. So I can't speak for that because I haven't read Albert Bender's book.
So Gray Barker's book is said to have been the introduction to the Men in Black phenomena.
All right, I feel better now.
Yeah.
OCD.
Yes, I know. To the UFO folklore. So his book introduces the concept of Men in Black into ufology. I found there is a UFO authority named Jerome Clark. He had discussed it, and he said that it's likely, actually, that FBI agents visited Bender because this was during the Cold War, and anybody who had nonconformist ideas that also had national security implications got J. Edgar Hoover's attention.
Exactly.
And they got investigated.
Exactly.
I also read that Gray Barker was interviewed. I think interviewed was the word, not interrogated. But I think they said interviewed by the FBI, and that J. Edgar Hoover actually had a copy of Gray Barker's book, but there's no transcripts or record of the interview that they did with Gray Barker.
That's interesting, but it's totally believable.
Yeah,
for the
but
times,
they did.
Makes total sense.
So I am going to say it is a possibility that these were FBI agents and they weren't mysteriously appearing or disappearing. That's been embellished a little bit.
Right.
Also, the migraines and the dizzy spells and the nausea, that's where the hypochondria becomes important.
Exactly.
Because it's very possible that he was creating those symptoms, that he was actually experiencing the symptoms, but they were psychosomatic.
Exactly.
So he's creating them because of the stress level.
Yeah.
It's possible that it was FBI agents, which is scary as crap.
That would be
why
terrifying,
are you showing
especially at that time?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
it was a lot different back then.
Yep.
Now we're going to jump to 1964, what is called the Solway Firth Spaceman incident.
Right.
And there's a photo associated with this. I'm going to get that and post that on social media because it's out there. I've seen it. I saw it before this. James Templeton was taking photos of his 5-year-old daughter. They were just out in the countryside, like grassy field. And he's listed as an amateur photographer. So it's probably something he did often. He's using a film camera, people, because it's 1964, just so we make sure everybody's on the same page.
No digital.
It's not digital. When he develops the film, he sees in one of the images, he has captured what appears to be a spaceman in the background of the photo. It actually looks like he's coming out of her head, the way that it's situated. So,
hey, that could have been like Men in Black from the movie.
I know. So he sends the photos to Kodak. He sends all the photos to Kodak, the negatives and everything. Kodak, which was the company that made the film, for those who aren't familiar, they determine it's an authentic photo, that there's no issue with the lab processing or the film. There are many different things that can happen with developing a photo that can create some issues, like double exposure, things like that. It wasn't any of those things. So there is nothing to explain this photo. It's not doctored. Obviously, Photoshop does not exist in 1964. Right. So it's authentic. non-altered. Later that year, he is visited by 2 large men over 6 feet tall, all dressed in black, wearing bowler hats and driving a black Jaguar. Apparently in the UK, because that's where this happened.
Right.
Them showing up in Jaguars is common.
Lucky.
So, I know. In the United States, a lot of times it's
like a Ford.
A Ford or a Cadillac, is also discussed.
Yes. Yep.
In the UK, apparently Jaguars are one that they show up in often. So these men claim to be agents of the UK's Ministry of Defence, and they referred to themselves as Agent Number 9 and Number 10, not Number 2. I can't help it. I'm sorry.
I just want to do a Monty Python reference, but I'll try not to.
I want to make a Uranus joke, but I haven't done that yet either. Oh, God. Oh, we're 10. These men want Jim Templeton to take them to the area where he took the photo.
Take me to your leader.
Yes, I know. Take me to your photo location. So when they arrive at the location, they ask him if this is the place that he had seen the alien, as they referred to it. He explained he hadn't seen them in real life. He only saw the spaceman on the actual photo. Apparently, they got hostile about that because he didn't see him in real life or something, and they stormed off. So Jim Templeton was also contacted by staff at a missile launch in Australia who said that 2 figures like the one in the photo were spotted on their security footage. Interestingly, the missile that was launched in Australia was manufactured less than 20 miles from where the photo was taken.
That's pretty freaky. And that's not something I've actually heard, until you did that research. I've heard this story many times, but I've never heard that part of it. So that's pretty fascinating.
It's interesting. And then the question is this alien or is this ghost? That would be a question to throw out there. They look like it looks like an astronaut. It looks like an old-time astronaut. The suit that they have on there. And I will get the photo and post it. Some of you may have seen it. If you search different paranormal things or stuff about aliens, it'll pop up. Okay, so this is going to bring us to 1966 to 67 and everybody's favorite location, Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Everybody remembers that from episode number 1, Mothman. If you don't remember, it's because you didn't listen, so you should go back and do that. Mothman was a strange flying humanoid creature with glowing red eyes, and he was seen for 13 months in and around Point Pleasant. I'm not going to go too deep into it because we already did episode 1.
But it also includes just a plethora of sightings and anomalies and all kinds of craziness during this time. It's not just Mothman. It's pretty mind-blowing. So
yeah, we only covered Mothman in our episode because it would have been like a 10-part episode or something.
It would have been.
There's so much, and there's more involving that we are going to get into. And even everything is connected. It is. Everything, it's like 6 degrees of knowing the paranormal or something instead of Kevin Bacon.
Yeah, Kevin Bacon's at the end of it.
Exactly.
So.
I wouldn't be surprised because Mothman is now tied in with Men in Black, which he was in the book anyway.
Right.
But then, again, there's a character. And by character, I don't mean like a fictional character. I mean a character like a weird person.
Yeah.
Named Indrid Cold.
Right.
Who is not of this world, apparently. In the Mothman Prophecies book, taking place during that whole time frame. And he will have his own episode because he deserves a separate episode. He's actually referenced often in some of the Men in Black shows or documentaries. Because it's possible that he is a Man in Black. How do you say that?
A man in black.
Whatever.
And the poltergeist activity, if you want to call it that, also features very, very prominently throughout the Mothman Prophecies. And it was, oh my gosh, it was just everywhere. There were so many experiencers in that town that were receiving these phone calls with nobody there, the clicks, the beeps, things like that. Very interesting things. And it all ties in together, so...
Most of the documented Men in Black cases that took place in Point Pleasant surrounding Mothman involved Mary Heyer, who was a local newspaper reporter. I actually have the Mothman Prophecies book, and I was going to read that little section because it's kind of, I think it's better to hear it from them than me paraphrasing it personally.
Yeah.
John Keel writes, Mrs. Mary Heyer entertained the first of her long string of peculiar visitors early in January 1967. She was working late in her office opposite the county courthouse when her door opened and a very small man entered. He was about 4 feet 6 inches tall. So this is the one I said didn't fit the tall
It's the
description.
outlier.
Yes. She told me in a phone call soon afterward. Although it was about 20 degrees Fahrenheit outside, he was wearing nothing but a short-sleeved blue shirt and blue trousers of thin-looking material. His eyes were dark and deep-set and were covered with thick-lensed glasses. He was wearing odd shoes with very thick soles, which probably added an inch or two to his height. Speaking in a low, halting voice, he asked her for directions to Welch, West Virginia, a town in the southeastern tip of the state. She thought at first that he had some kind of speech impediment. His black hair was long and cut squarely like a bowl haircut. A bowl haircut, for anybody who doesn't know, it's when your parent would put a bowl in your head and cut your hair around the edge of the bowl. It's literally shaped like a bowl.
Thing. People did that.
So he had a bowl haircut, and his eyes remained fixed on her in an unflinching, hypnotic way. He kept getting closer and closer, she reported, his funny eyes staring at me almost hypnotically. He told her a long-winded, disjointed story about his truck breaking down in Detroit, Michigan. He had hitchhiked all the way from Detroit. As he talked, he inched closer and closer to her, and she became frightened, thinking she had some kind of nut on her hands. She pulled back from her desk and ran into the back room where her newspaper's circulation manager was working on a telephone campaign. He joined her and they spoke together to the little man. He seemed to know more about West Virginia than we did, she declared later. At one point, the telephone rang, and while she was speaking on it, the little man picked up a ballpoint pen from her desk and examined it with amazement, as if he had never seen a pen before. You can have that if you want it, she offered. He responded with a loud, peculiar laugh, a kind of cackle. Then he ran out into the night and disappeared around a corner. The next day, Mrs. Heyer checked with the sheriff's office to find out if there were any mentally deficient person on the loose. The answer was negative. That would creep me out. Somebody like that showed up at my office.
Oh, yeah.
Thank goodness there was somebody there with her.
Right.
Because that's pretty creepy.
Mm-hmm.
She continued to write about and research the Mothman phenomena and also had more visits from Men in Black in the late 1967 time frame. Mm-hmm. The strangest encounter when 2 Asian-looking men, looking like identical twins and dressed in black overcoats, showed up at the newspaper office. One noted that there had been a lot of UFO activity in the area, and Mary agreed. Then the questions began. Had anyone asked her not to publish the details of such activity? She said no, there had been no silencing attempts. Then they wanted to know what her response would be if someone did warn her not to print those stories, and she said, I'd tell them to go to hell. So then after she glanced at her desk, and then when she looked up again, the 2 men were gone.
So that goes to show how diverse the Men in Black can be. But from a lot of the accounts that we've read, that's not typical either.
No.
So yes, they can be, they don't all have pale skin. They're not all tall and gaunt. But it just goes to show that you can't really necessarily pigeonhole them.
No, and
as far as appearance.
No, and I've seen there are quite a few that are described as Oriental looking.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like the 2 in that last account with Mary Heyer. Now we're jumping to October of 1973. There was a gentleman by the name of Steve Geiger, and he sees a large, round, red sphere that's as big as a barn hovering over an area of his farm. He and a couple of other men, their family, I don't remember if they were his brothers or his cousins.
Or his sisters or his mothers.
They weren't female, they were men.
They were men.
I think it said his cousins, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
He and these other men go out to the field with a gun. Because that's what you do.
Because that's what we do.
In 1973 on a farm, you see something funky, you're taking a gun.
Big red glowing object.
Yeah. So they get out to the field and they see 2 huge humanoids, 7 to 9 feet tall, and their arms are extremely long, so long that the hands are hanging past their knees, and they have self-illuminating eyes. So
Lurch with self-illuminating eyes.
Basically, yes. Steve Geiger fires at the creatures, and with the second shot, the object and the creatures both disappear. He is certain that he's hit at least one of the creatures.
Which is reminiscent of Skinwalker.
Skinwalker had the wolf that was shot like 6 times including with the 357 Magnum, I think it was.
Yeah, I think they shot it with two different.
Basically did nothing.
It disappeared.
It ran off and the tracks disappeared. So go listen to that episode if you haven't. It's a two-parter. Also, like Skinwalker, the red orb. There's all kinds of spheres and orbs and portals of various colors showing up on Skinwalker Ranch.
And beyond the Bentwaters case, I mean, there are so many UFO cases of red orbs that we couldn't even name them all. Because it's just such a commonality.
Yes. So a gentleman by the name of Stan Gordon is called in to investigate, and he investigated UFO accounts. He arrives and the state police are on the scene, and they take him and show him an area on the ground that had a strange luminescence. For a long time after that, the animals would not go near that area, which is again like Skinwalker.
Right.
If you watch Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch, it's talked about on that. After this, two strange men show up at the farm. One's dressed like a Men in Black, one's dressed in an Air Force uniform. And Mr. Geiger thought that they were with Stan Gordon, and they told him everything was normal. He wasn't crazy, and none of it was worth reporting. And then, because
nothing to see here.
There's nothing to see. Ignore the man behind the curtain.
Yes.
So because he thought they were with Stan Gordon, he allowed them to hypnotize him. And it said that he never got over the trauma of the whole event. That was kind of the last of the information that I saw on that. So that's pretty creepy. There's a couple of creepy accounts that Stan Gordon discusses and talks about that involve creatures and Men in Black. But I kept it.
Yeah.
Any
more with hypnosis, I'm wondering? Just because Herbert Hopkins.
Not that I remember, but self-illuminating eyes, yes.
Okay.
Trying to get into a woman's trailer.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was creepy.
That's creepy.
Now we're September 1976, and we're going to talk about a man named Dr. Herbert Hopkins. He gets a phone call. Well, let me back that up. Dr. Herbert Hopkins was, he was a doctor, but he was also a UFO enthusiast and researcher.
Right. And he also had experience in the field of hypnosis.
He had been researching a case, and he gets a phone call. Oh, you know the name of the case.
Right. So he'd recently regressed an alleged abductee named David Stevens, who was from a nearby town. Hopkins was from Old Orchard Beach, Maine. David Stevens lived in Oxford, Maine. So this is the case that he was researching.
September 1976, he gets a phone call asking about his UFO research. And the man on the phone is saying that he's also a UFO researcher, and he wants to know if Hopkins is alone. I really love when people call and say, "Hey, are you alone?"
Must be different for men.
I guess. I don't know.
Yes, I am. Come right over.
As the conversation begins to wrap up, Hopkins notices that the man on the phone is actually at his door. Hopkins then claimed that the man, who was bald, with no eyebrows or eyelashes, pulled something from his pocket. It was a copper coin. Now, there's another part of this story that the man didn't have the coin. He knew that Hopkins had two pennies in his pocket. They were pennies. And he asked Hopkins to pull them out of his pocket, and he tells him to watch the coin. As Hopkins watches, the coin turns blue and then begins to dissolve until it vanishes. So the mysterious man also asked if Herbert Hopkins knew the alien abductee Barney Hill. You're going to hear about Barney Hill. The anniversary is coming up mid-September, and we do have that planned as an episode. Barney and Betty Hill they were alien abductees. Dr. Hopkins said that yes, he did know of Barney Hill, and that Barney Hill had died a couple of years before. And the strange man says, Barney didn't have a heart, just like you no longer have a coin. And he's basically implying that perhaps Mr. Hill had been killed. And then the man tells Hopkins to destroy all of his research and evidence, and then he leaves. Hopkins does actually burn all of his research. He still had phone issues, that strange clicking that made him think that somebody was tapping the phone line, which happened quite a bit in Point Pleasant area during Mothman.
Yeah. And also, just to be clear, Barney Hill did not die of a heart attack. He died of a cerebral hemorrhage in 1969. So who knows why the man made that reference I don't know. That threat. But
all I can envision is Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, when the guy reaches into the chest and pulls out the beating heart.
Exactly.
That's what I think of.
Yes.
Which is super gross.
Yeah.
Not my favorite
Aztec sacrifices,
Yeah. So anyway, just so you know, celebrities are not immune to the Men in Black phenomena.
Phenomena.
But I'm not talking about the Men in Black movies. Dan Aykroyd, who, for those of you who don't know, was Ray in the Ghostbusters 1 and 2.
Everybody should know Dan Aykroyd.
If you don't know Dan Aykroyd, we can't be friends.
I know.
If you don't know that he was Ray on the Ghostbusters, we can't be friends.
Yes. And he's, oh my God, he's hilarious.
Yes, he is.
And he is also someone who has had his own UFO sighting.
Yes.
So.
He was in the process of filming a show that was focused on UFOs and encounters.
It was called Out There.
Out There.
And it was picked up by the Sci-Fi Channel. They had recorded 8 episodes. They were working on their last episode when this incident happened.
Yeah, they're filming, and Aykroyd takes a break to make a phone call. So he goes outside, and he's on the phone, and while he's on the phone, he notices a large black Ford with a tall man in black staring him down. And he looks briefly away. When he looks back, the man and the car are both gone. So he returns to the set to finish filming, and when he returns, he's told that the show is canceled and they were to stop production immediately, and that was it.
Yeah. And on that day, he was actually interviewing Stephen Bassett and Stephen Greer. He had completed one interview, and he went back in to do the second interview. He says it was 2 hours after his smoke break, so I'm kind of assuming they probably did that second interview before he got the news that they were canceling it. Mm-hmm. So all 8 episodes are there. They've just never been released.
And he's wanted to release it on DVD, but they have not, to our knowledge, been released.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a clip we'll link for you to watch that it's a firsthand account from him, and he says that he plans on releasing these episodes. I think this clip was dated 2012, so this show was taped in 2002. I was looking all over the place for this DVD or for any information, and to my knowledge, it wasn't ever released. So that's kind of interesting too, because you would think that I believe he's the person who pitched the idea. So this was really his show, that he can't even release it on DVD. I find that to be so weird. So weird.
Makes you wonder what happened.
It does, because he's a person that does have power, in Hollywood. Yeah. He's been in the industry for a really long time. Mm-hmm. And he's very well respected. So
yes. So now we're going to jump to 2008. And we're going to talk about something some of you may be familiar with. If you're familiar with the alien UFO scene, you may have heard of this. It happened in Niagara Falls. October 14th, 2008, the general manager of the Sheraton at the Falls Hotel in Niagara Falls, Ontario, so we're on the Canada side.
The darker side.
The cleaner side.
The cleaner side.
I've never
the
been,
nicer side, I've heard.
I've never been to Niagara Falls. My parents have, but everything I say says that
the Canadian
side is the
better.
Cleaner side. The manager, along with the security officer, witness a triangle-shaped UFO that's flying over the hotel. Then it starts hovering over the falls. Both saw a white beam of light shine down onto the water, and then it moved towards their general direction. 1 week later, in the early morning, the manager again saw a similar looking UFO flying over the area, but it was at a much higher altitude. There was actually a Washington, D.C. based UFO research organization that launched an investigation into the incident. Then on May 15th, 2009, 2 strange men approached the hotel bellman looking for the manager, and the bellman said the 2 men were taller than average and extremely odd looking. Mm-hmm. They also approached a female employee working at the service desk. She said the encounter was horrifying. The 2 men asked her about the hotel manager, and she noticed both men were pale, with no facial hair, so no eyebrows or eyelashes, and they had large blue eyes, and when they made eye contact with her, they seemed almost hypnotic. When she was recounting the event, she actually started crying, and then mentioned that the strangers never blinked. She was very upset, like even just retelling it, she was upset about it and said that they never even blinked that she saw. After they spoke to the employees and learned the manager was not there, they began talking about the government and conspiracy theories, and eventually they left. So that was strange.
That's pretty strange.
That's pretty strange. But the thing that makes it stranger is the fact that the manager decides to go through security footage to see these 2 men. And he actually finds the footage of them entering the hotel.
Right.
We'll get the link to that and put it up there because you can find it. It's
all over
super
YouTube.
easy to find.
Yeah, very easy.
We'll put it on social media and we'll link it in the show notes. But you can see them entering the hotel, and they are tall, and they look identical. I mean,
They do.
It's closed caption TV.
Broad shoulder, black coats.
The black uniform, black
the
hat.
whole thing.
I mean, it's not...
You can't see details.
It's not clear.
See, right.
It's CCTV.
Yeah. So you're not going to see a bald head. You're not going to see the lack of
but they
facial hair.
look so similar that it's weird. It's just...
Yeah.
It's strange. It makes you really question it. So... This is one of the few times that they have been I mean, there are other photographs out there.
But filmed in that manner.
But filmed like that. And this is more authentic because it really wasn't somebody taking a picture.
Right.
It was because they were, it's security footage. It's automatically being recorded.
Yeah.
Because there are a couple other claims of photos. Is it Jack Robinson?
Yes.
Who was a gentleman who was he and his wife were plagued by a strange... Man in black.
This man that would stand outside across from their apartment building every day for a long time. This is in 1968, but the long and short of it is there's very credible debate that this person had anything to do with the Men in Black. That was actually thought that he was probably like a bookie or something like that. So.
Looking at the photo, somebody took a photo, and he's kind of portly, which goes against all of the descriptions of the Men in Black. They're all thin. I've never seen a description where they had a belly on them, and this guy kind of did, and they said he disappeared, but it was kind of speculated, well, he disappeared because he saw the guy snapping his photo.
Yeah, because they were hanging out of the car when they took this photo because it was rush hour. And so the guy that's taking the photo leans out of the car, snaps the picture, and lo and behold, the man disappears when they come back around the corner.
Well, so because
if you're doing something illegal,
you don't want your photo taken,
right? And he never reappears again after that. Yeah. He never shows up
because
there.
he thinks people are probably watching him. Yeah. I discount that.
I do
that completely. So really, and then there was another photo somebody took of a supposed Man in Black, and it was in Nick Redfern's book.
Yeah,
but it doesn't look. He's wearing a white hat.
Yes, I saw that,
and he's a young guy, and I'm thinking, who are you trying to fool? So I was like, I'm not even bringing that up either, other than to just be like, it's ridiculous.
Right.
So this is really one of the only ones that I think could be authentic because it was not staged in any way. It was the actual footage from the hotel.
I wonder if you would even tie some of the experiences that some of the people had in Roswell with Men in Black. I'm throwing it out there only because I know that there were people that told them not to talk, but I don't ever recall anybody specifically saying they were Men in Black. So that's a curiosity, maybe.
Right.
If you're really interested, you can go and look into that and let us know.
Yes. So that brings us to some of the theories. We're not going to go into them in detail.
No, because we
pretty much
have.
Yeah.
I mean, they're either...
We'll just run down them.
G-men or they're not G-men.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of well, they're saying some could
robots
be
or aliens.
Yeah.
They're hallucinations or
hallucinations. Hallucinations was thrown out, I think, because of Albert Bender.
I think that's kind of unfair. I mean,
and we already pretty much said that I don't think.
I thought something happened.
I think that there's embellishment within the story, but something happened. He did not stop the IFSB on a whim or a hallucination. Something happened.
Yeah. Interestingly, he lived to be 94 years old. Yeah. I just have to throw that into the mix too, because I thought that was fascinating. I mean, this guy that had all this stuff going on, again, ran this organization after the IFSB for a really long time.
So he's not crazy to the point of not being able to be a competent human being.
Exactly.
So OCD does not really create hallucinations, and neither does hypochondria.
No.
It creates body ailments.
Annoyances for people.
So I think that's a little unfair.
Yeah.
Hoaxes is thrown in there, and I think there are probably accounts... And the ones that we discussed, no. But I think there are accounts out there that are hoaxes, people seeking attention.
Oh, sure.
Narcissist.
Yes.
Gotta throw that in there.
And there are, and just mental illness.
Yeah, mental illness.
I mean, it is, that can be in the
So
mix
the hallucinations
also.
could come in with a different person, but I don't think it was directed at Albert Bender. The other thing is tulpa. Is that how you say that?
Yes, I think
Tulpa.
so. We talked about that. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
we
that
did.
is tulpa.
A tulpa, for those who aren't aware, is basically something that actually gains reality after being conjured from the imagination of the conjurer. So basically, you think it into being.
Right.
Vampires was thrown in there, which I could see the paleness, maybe the thinness, but
The
I
red
don't.
lips, that's probably red
Well,
lipstick.
it's what's his name? What's his name? Tell me, because I can't think of what it. The old vampire.
No, this is the one.
Nosferatu. That's what I think.
Yeah.
Nosferatu, totally Men in Black material, I think.
Yes.
But I don't really think that. I don't think vampires.
I don't think vampires either.
I don't think tulpas either, to be honest with you. Time travelers is another one. That is a possibility. I actually read something.
But why?
Well, maybe to understand what's happened, or because what they're seeing is something from the future that's time traveling, and they're like, crap, we don't really want to mess up the time-space continuum and have people realize what's going on, so let's try to forget it. I don't know. I'm making something up. I did see something in the Mothman Prophecies book by John Keel, because I don't know that I mentioned that's who wrote that. But in John Keel's book, there's an account with a man in black, and apparently the man in black said something along the lines of "see you in time" or something like that. And then he saw him later and was like, "Do you remember me?" And he's like, "Yes." And he's like, "I'll see you in time." And I don't know, maybe time. I don't know. Maybe. Demons, of course, they've got to be in there. You know, my favorite topic.
Everything is a demon.
Everything's a demon. I don't think they're demons.
No.
FBI agents or other government agents, I think, is a possibility, especially like Albert Bender or
I do think
other
that's
ones
a
in that time frame because of all the other things that were going on.
Right. And I think too at that time, if we really didn't know what was going on, there was a lot of reason for them to control kind of the narrative. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that would make a lot of sense to me. I personally have always assumed they were government men up until researching them more. I didn't even know that people thought they were anything but government men. So that was kind of a surprise to me, the alien angle.
And then the other option is civilian investigators, people who are checking it out for themselves that aren't really with any government agency. And in John Keel's book, he does mention that people were snapping photos of other people who had witnessed and talked about their Mothman encounters and things like that. And they were just everyday people on the street taking photos because they're being nosy type of thing. So
yeah.
Who knows?
And a lot of people in West Virginia at that time had these encounters with these so-called men in black. So if you, again, read John Keel's book, The Mothman Prophecies, you will hear of those accounts in there because there's a lot of them.
So that does it for this episode. You can find us wherever that you... Jesus Christ. You can find us wherever it is that you listen to your favorite podcasts. We're on all the platforms. You can also find us at lurkpodcast.com. You'll find the episodes there. You can also find links to the different podcast directories there and all of our social media. So we have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and a YouTube channel. And we have merchandise. So you can go buy a cool t-shirt or hoodie or tank top. And you can find that at Lurk Podcast Merch, merch.com. And as always,
keep lurking.